tutaj mogę usiąść, czy siadamy?
Znaczy ja bym chciał nas z kraju, albo tu tak jak w tym, bo tak jest po kolei. Bo nie mam wizytówki.
Dobra, no może być profesor,
Dobra, dobra.
ale może też być na cały co wszystko jest.
Dobrze to? Super. Dzień dobry, witam Państwa.
My name is Mariusz Marszałkowski. I am deputy editor of the Defense 24 magazine, and today I will have a panel entitled Investment in Polish Defense Industry, what to do to make sure that arms-based expenditure supports development of industry, innovation and labor market. I would like to welcome two panelists. We will have the third panelist later on. He will be late. So I would like to welcome Professor Paweł Wojciechowski, Institute of the Public Finance. Good afternoon, Professor. I would like to welcome President Bartłomiej Zając of WP Group. Later on, we will have Leszek Stypułkowski joining our panel. He is the CEO of the Krajowy Bank. He will be late. The expectation of this session is and the first question is for President Wojciechowski. A very important aspect, we are spending billions of zlotys on defense industry. Huge expenditure is made, huge budget of the Ministry of National Defense to modernize the Polish army. Initially, in the early years 2000, this expenditure was 18 to 20 billion zlotys. Nowadays, about 200 billion zlotys, and the fund for support the armed forces. So the first question is Poland, Polish economy. Does Poland use this huge expenditure for the arms? Does it support our economy and innovation? What's your opinion as an observer? Thank you for the invitation. I would like to say that for the purpose of this panel, together with my colleague Wojciech Decewicz, we have drafted a special report, Investment on the Polish Defense Industry. It will be published by Liberty Foundation. To answer your question, it is a question of key importance, because if we observe the last decade and the next decade, the scale of expenditure will be doubled. It will be a stable change. Although this expenditure will not be growing so dynamically, we were also using Deloitte report, so there will be also other expenditure on personnel, expenditure on maintaining the equipment, buying purchase of munitions. So we're looking at 5 8% of GDP. So year by year, this expenditure will grow by some 16 billion zlotys. So this is like the raises of the taxes proposed by Minister Domański. So we can say these are the taxes that will be used on defense. But of course, it's a joke. Now the situation is as follows. What to do to make sure that it is profitable? We are using the so-called fiscal multipliers that are very low. The level of these indicators depends on import absorption rate and other elements. So this is a low level, because if we look at the level of orders, we can read that 3 to 7% of the spending is for defense industry. So when Deloitte is making some forecast for the world, it's 40%. So when this funding is passed to the industry, the so-called local contact, so funding for suppliers, for cooperating entities, this indicator is reduced. So our bank has 13 billion zlotys of profit, and we are a monopoly, but it's more profitable to buy some components abroad rather than to cooperate with the Polish defense industry or national industry. So we do not have this crowd-in effect, it's rather crowding out effect. And there was a research conducted by 3 economists. It dated back to 2024. Garcia Salvador and 2 other economists stated that if you have a large share of personnel cost, if there is a high share of import absorption rate, and there is a huge fiscal space, and this is the trend in Poland, then the defense-related expenditure is not the driving engine for the economy. It's rather a burden. So that means that per 1 zlotys, nowadays under this structure, we spend in such a way that this zloty is missing from the economic growth. And this is the dilemma, what to do to improve the situation. I have to ask another question. We hear of the examples of such countries as South Korea or Turkey that for very long period had high spending on defense, and geopolitical situation of these countries really forced them to do a lot of spending for defense-related infrastructure. So when the defense army is a pillar of development, when there is innovation level quite high, well, why? You have mentioned that in Poland this kind of expenditure can be a kind of a burden. So why Turkey and Korea are successful and we are not successful? It's because due to the fact that their economic policy is not focused on the orders for the national companies. They focus their efforts to build the chains of supply where the values is developed locally. So Turkey mentioned that they want to have their own logistics independence. So in Korea, Hyundai was invited to cooperation to build a tank, but then this tank will be built in Turkey. So we did the same project with Krab. So the chassis was made in Korea. The rest of components were built in the Polish steelworks. I think that the engine is still not manufactured in Poland. So when we look at the offset, I remember I was the president of Palichu and Palizu. I remember that offsets were treated In this way, Poland agreed to offset, but the gains were not for the Polish industry, but the profits were passed to Dell. And the president of Dell was trying to convince me that we should use the offsets to create jobs for Polish employees. Then we changed that approach, so the concept of using offsets in the Polish defense industry. Actually, it was not used in the MRO segment, so maintenance, service, renovation. So this segment, of course, is developing. We need it, but when we look at the global value added in the chain of value, the letter U is always included. So when the innovation is developed, there is a high value added. Then there is the part of assembly. So the value added is low. And finally, when there are sales, this value is growing and the profits are reinvested in the parent company. So we are always at the bottom. So paradoxically, the defense industry, which is under our competence, we are trying to say that it should be Polish. We want to have a full control over this segment, and still we are unable to cope with this, to arrange this segment of the market in such a way to operate just like in Turkey. Some examples from Turkey. Does Turkey spend more on defense industry? No, Poland spends, according to CIPRI, Poland spends 4.7% of GDP, Poland below 2%. So Poland spends Turkey spends 25 billion euro and Poland spends only 7. And the share in R&D sector. Actually, the levels are very similar, 1.5% of GDP in Poland, similar in Turkey. In the United States, actually this ratio is mainly spent on defense industry, then it's used for dual use, and we have, for example, some army-related inventions included. A lot of funding is passed to develop army in Israel, so if there is a conscious policy to have a full chain of supplies, and of course the main focus is searching for value added and technological innovation. So we can say that in Turkey we are looking at some 70%, in Poland only 20%. So we have to change this, otherwise we will not improve fiscal multipliers and we will be blamed that we are spending on the defense industry that does not generate profits for the economy. Now the question is to President Zając. We've already heard the term transfer of technologies, offset, so cooperation, industrial cooperation among various entities between national and international entities. So what's this weekend transfer of technology mean to you? How do you understand this? Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for the invitation. And I would like to say, hello everyone. Professor said technological independence, sovereignty. When we are talking about technological transfers, we should remember that the final outcome of this path should include technological independence that will allow us to operate during the time of crisis, war. We should be independent. It's not just about equipment and effectors, it's mainly about munition. So this is of key importance. We are confusing these terms at various levels, also at decision political levels. So we are confusing technological transfer with production transfer. So sometimes we conduct production that does not provide any stimulus for development of the Polish defense industry. So for example, we are talking about production of some specific technologies. It's not about joining some components using robots. So, for example, we are talking about joining of gearboxes with other components. This is something that has not been applied in Poland, and after the systemic change, we lost the capabilities. You have mentioned an example of Korea. That's true, but before World War II, Polish engineers were constructing planes, and South Korea didn't have technologies to make rifles and guns. So that development was due to the intention of save the Korean nation. That was the main stimulus in Korea. So you also have to acknowledge culture-related indicators. So we should start with something that seems obvious, a catalog of critical technologies critical to the national security. So it's not about armed technologies, it's about power-related technologies, health protection, health security capabilities. We do not have this kind of catalog. So all the time we will have problems whether we should buy an aircraft of a new generation, whether we should use these kind of offsets or not. So at the end of the day, we know that we will not become the global the global leader of military aircrafts, but they are of key importance to our national security, and the rockets related technologies are of key importance. So it's not about technical details that should be included in this list, but we should develop such a catalog. It's not a secret that at Grunwald, during Grunwald battle, Poland used cannons. Historical sources states that cannons were used even before Grunwald, which was in 1410. So it's quite an advancement, and nowadays we cannot manufacture munitions for our artillery to meet the needs of the Polish army during the war time. So we should define which technologies are of key importance, communication related technologies or other crisis-related technologies that would provide us with independence from the West. So what did we find out during the conflict in Ukraine? At the end of the day, it's not the militaries who decide on the use of the specific weapons. It's a decision made by politicians. It's politicians decide whether American weapons will be able to use the 200-kilometer range weapons. So, geopolitical changes have importance. Elon Musk on Tuesday said that Starlinks will be for use by Ukrainians in the sea, but on Wednesday he said that Starlinks will not be available to Ukrainians. So we have drafted a catalog of the critical technologies that are important for the national security. So step by step, we should develop a narrative for the Polish defense industry. So the outcome will be using these technologies in cannons, tanks, aircrafts, and other types of equipment, radio communication, satellite communication. So these are huge areas that we should operate on. You have mentioned technological and production-related transfers. So you are experienced, or maybe you will acquire soon some experience how to cooperate with Koreans to manufacture missiles with the reach of some 80 kilometers. So I'd like to ask you about this context. So can you perceive a potential to transfer the production or transfer technology in terms of this kind of cooperation? President Leszek Stypułkowski. Good afternoon. I do apologize for being late. Huge traffic jams at A2 motorway. So, if you could answer my question, please.
Well, guys, both. The answer is both, because we transfer those technologies that we do not have in Poland today. I don't want to talk about missiles, you know, what is transferred or not, because that's not the point, but the answer is both. Please note that besides the fact that we do not have technology, we do not have knowledge about particular technologies, we do not have knowledge about production. Why such ideas as Izera electric car were not built to date? Because we don't know how to do it. Please note that in Poland we manufacture engines, combustion engines, we manufacture cars. Do we know how to do it as a country, as an industry? No, we do not. Because this is knowledge that comes from abroad. We have lost those abilities. So we need this knowledge coming from abroad. That is why we cooperate with Koreans. We transfer technology. We learn what this missile needs to fly left or right, to target properly. But together with Koreans, we are building a factory that will remain in Poland and that will employ Polish employees. We are learning how to materialize such technologies in a large-scale production. Actually, I looked at that missile. The agreement was signed during the fair in Kielce in presence of Mr. Kosiniak-Kamysz. But I went to Mr. Cyrek from Harvard Aerospace and asked which part of this will be the technology transfer. You know, look at the missile. It is long fuselage. H2 Security, HWB sign an agreement. Joint parts are first and foremost the drive, the propeller, then the explosive part. But the last part, the one that controls the actual missile, remains Korean know-how. So I asked why. And I believe that as the Koreans Koreanize their equipment, they have taken this technology from Americans. And a lot of this is happening. We keep imitating. We cannot fully benefit from the technology transfer, although it is happening in the economy a little bit. The research and development doesn't really go to the defense industry. NCBR throws 6-7 billion PLN very broadly, but it's not like in US where 40% goes to research and development for defense industry controlled by DARPA. So capturing the know-how that would be the strength of innovation does not happen in Polish defense industry. So the question is, how can a monopolist like Polish Defense Group develop the relationship with their partners, not just foreign, but also Polish, to capture this know-how and to make it Polish IP? Why is it easier with Koreans? Well, they say, we have Korea in the north, we want to diversify. Poland is an excellent partner. They have overtaken us in this process by many lengths, by controlling the full value chain, by seeking industrial and technological sovereignty. So, since President Stypułkowski is already with us, President, a question to you. It was mentioned during the discussion before you joined us, but in general, innovation is money. In order to have innovation, you need money. The banks provide this money to a large extent, including the Bank Gospodarstwa Krajowego as an institution. So how do we make Polish companies and Polish defense industry utilize the innovation money more effectively. Even if they don't have money in their own budgets, they can use bank loans. So how do you see it from the perspective of a bank? Is there room for improvement, room for cooperation with the industry? Well, sir, you have mentioned many important issues, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm very happy that I can be here with you. As we think of innovation, we usually think about breakthrough, disruptive technologies that change everything. But as the experience of war in Ukraine shows, there are no super breakthrough disruptive technologies there. They simply operate in the conditions of the economy of shortage. They have very limited resources. The enemy force is overwhelming. And it is the speed, agility, and, so to say, cleverness allow combining existing technologies so as to meet the challenges of the modern battlefield. So, in my impression, as I look at the Polish innovation sector, we have a lot of good innovative technologies, including ones that are developed at the schools, but also companies like EWB or Radmor, but they do not have a guaranteed uptake, no grants that would allow those technologies to prove themselves at test grounds, to gain scale. Because, for example, the ordering authority may change its approach to the tender, and it will no longer be that, all the documents must be compliant, but rather the objectives must be realized, the objectives of the ordering party. So this is a new approach, but it is necessary. Bank Gospodarstwa Krajowego manages very significant funds. It is the fund for support of Polish Defense Force, and under current EU agreement, we have negotiated a massive SAFE program. It will be a total of 200 billion euros. Poland will receive the greatest grant, 40 billion euros. We also have the Fund for Safety and Defense, created upon the suggestion of Prime Minister Kosiniak-Kamysz, and it shifts funds from the green transition of cities to building resilience in defense sector. So the money is available. Additionally, the investment market segment has moved, venture capital, private equity. The BGK also has similar funds under Vinci. We are now looking for projects, we are looking for calls for projects. So I would not worry about money. It is available both in form of equity, you can count on partners, or in form of debt, because the SAFE program will be programs of preferential loans with grant components, and grants are available at NCBR, and the Ministry of Defense is also working on it. What we have to focus on is coordination. We have to design this entire process in such a way that first we have test fields, and second, the large ordering parties like Polish Defense Group should see companies that are already present in a market, that have time-proven innovative solutions that have to be integrated, just have to be integrated better. Maybe better software should be provided so that the modern battlefield challenges can be met. So the matter of coordination is key. The money is there. The ordering parties simply have to change their approach from listing the terms of reference and conditions to objective focused. And as has been mentioned here today, we will make a great error as Poland if we use the borrowed money to buy a lot of toys from various countries. I would treat this money as a great opportunity, because we all remember the Cold War and what happened in the Persian Gulf when Israel was preparing to defend itself. an arms race is a huge impulse for development of innovative economy, because space technologies were developed as a result of arms race, so have drone technologies. All that started with the military. So we should treat military spending, defense spending, as an impulse for development of innovative economy. Even if the state provides the money, let them keep the partial IP in the defense systems, but let the private entities have skin in the game and commercialize those solutions, exporting as fast as possible. It needs to be better coordinated. The money is there, we just have to approach it in a different way. Let me ask about the environmental context. Are Polish companies innovative? Please be frank, because often it is said, well, Polish IT specialists, Polish programming is so good, but this success is not always visible. Commercialization of certain innovations does not always happen. We see that some companies spend a lot of money on new products, new solutions, but those are ultimately not used by the military, by the industry, or by the civilian sector. So are Polish companies innovative? And if they are, if we can say yes, why is this commercial effect not as we would like to see it? That's an interesting question. I always wonder why Polish people tend to keep thinking that we are still not good enough. I mean, the past 30 years show that our economy was one among the fastest growing in the world. We have made a quantum leap from a developing country to a developed country. Our GDP places us close to the G20 group. So instead of saying, wow, we've done a good job, if it were not for the entrepreneurial spirit, if it were not for Polish companies, especially SMEs that go abroad, we would not have those achievements. There are 184 countries in the world. We are in top 20. It did happen somehow. Today's Nobel Prize recipients say very clearly, the economies must be innovative if they are to develop. So I would like to set it straight. Polish companies are innovative. There's a lot of good innovative technologies. The gap that we have not noticed in the bank is the offtake gap. Those good innovative technologies are not able to find buyers, especially in the domestic market. So the large players, Polish champions, both Treasury of State companies and private companies, should give a chance to smaller innovative companies to allow them to scale up in a process that was called creative destruction by the Nobel Prize recipients. We have the huge incumbent, and we have the newcomer, the small innovative company. So far, these small companies, the big companies, have tried to stomp on those smaller ones, treating them as competition, not giving them an opportunity to develop. For example, sometimes instead of providing good margins, they were focusing on the lowest price, which means that sometimes even if the product was delivered, it was at a break-even point or even below it. So we have to bridge the offtake gap. The large players should develop the vendors' management programs, Tier 1, Tier 2, and so on. In energy, Tier 1 are the consolidators, often large foreign companies with good financial resilience, and they bring their subcontractors with them. And we should say, okay, a large company gets a large contract, but this is strategic Polish technologies, key Polish IP, Polish strategy. We want these to be included in the Tier 2, Tier 3. We want them to be included in the contract as Tier 2, Tier 3, and we want them to make fair money. It can be negotiated with the business people who understand business at the negotiation table, but it is something that we have to implement in our public procurement, in the certification systems, in creating the database of key entities for Polish defense system. This would be a good path to make sure that good Polish innovative companies that made us advance into the G20 this would enable them to go to external markets and develop their competitive advantages. President Zając has grabbed the microphone, and it's good because I was about to ask you a question. Mr. President, you have mentioned this innovation, and a lot of positive information was there, but I would like to mention and ask about your practice as an industrialist, because you indeed do produce innovative products. Radmor is also an innovative company with a lot of innovative products. So, as we look at procurement of French public sector, they focus, regardless whether the procurement is done based on European funds or domestic funds, they make sure that the contracts go to local French industry. Same happens in Germany, in UK, in Spain. But in our case, in Poland, even in your company, we see that Radmor is manufacturing various communication devices, but procurement contracts go to foreign companies. So why does it happen? I mean, it's probably not a question to you, it is a question to the procuring party, but from your perspective, why does it happen? Why is Polish industry left out of procurement? Well, it would seem... Well, this brings us back to technological sovereignty. Thanks to innovative solutions, we gain technological sovereignty. So I would like to respond to Mr. President. Yes, Polish enterprises are innovative, but the sector we operate in is not free. It is heavily regulated with a very high entry barriers, and small entities with good ideas are stomped on by the large one, are suppressed by the large ones. So this should be resolved by specifying what innovation is necessary in this industry. Because it's not like we produce products for free market and we will sell them to the highest bidder. No, our main client are Polish armed forces or allied army, allied military. So somebody has to say, in which direction are we going? What is the strategy of the Minister of Defense? What is the multi-year plan? Not a plan for a single term of office, but plan for years. Where do we want to arrive? Do we want our own satellites, or do we want to buy them? Do we want the red button for our devices to be in Poland or abroad? And going back to your question as to why we buy foreign equipment, because in many cases, first of all, it can be bought off the shelf. It may be old, it may be technologically not adequate to the modern times, but it's there. When it is not in Poland, the Ministry of Defense at the moment of risk generates this kind of procurement. Secondly, we are dominated by our allies, and here arguments emerge that, well, we are part of NATO, the equipment has to be NATO compatible, communications have to be compatible, and so on and so forth. But we have to remember one thing. The compatibility always goes one way only. We have to be compatible with our allies, but not the reverse. And this is our problem. We do not know how to set boundaries. We do not know how to belabor our point. As Radmor, we work with this SOE where the 6 NATO countries are building standards for communications. And only once the largest companies in Europe built their own space, Americans woke up and they say, hey, we want in as well. And this changes the situation, changes the paradigm. But under the guise of this major alliance with the United States, I mean, not everybody can ask that question, but the industry can. Are we going to be sovereign in using that equipment? And we do not know that. And there is a probability that we would not be able to use certain types of equipment without the consent of our partners. So this moment is the time when we can take care of our technological sovereignty, our industrial sovereignty, and build the power of Polish industry. But without clear plans, guidelines, and strategies as to where we are going as a country, as a state that is building strong industry and strong military, the industry by itself cannot determine this. I mean, today we have 7 types of tanks in 2 systems, metric and imperial. From the perspective of logistics, it is, let's call it difficult. So this is the moment when we should invest in this industry, in innovation, because industry is innovative. We really do develop very nice things, and let's not be bashful about it. Let's not have complexes. We have a lot of complexes of being behind others. We are not behind anybody in terms of engineering and innovation. But the funds that are aggregated are not properly stimulated. These projects are not properly stimulated.
And that was to be the job for the National Center for Research and Development. That's probably for a separate panel, but we can say that the aggregation of the projects and funding is of key importance to this industry's simulation. What does we expect of this industry, and what the direction of the development should be? When we are having this kind of discussions, we hear that the industry doesn't meet the needs of the army, and then the army does not identify and communicate its needs. So there is no space of using, testing, implementing this equipment, provide feedback to the industry. So what to do to improve this situation? What to do to make sure that in terms of innovation, this cooperation is closer and based on partnership? So that should lead us to the success of the army using the equipment it desires, and the industry will receive the stimulus to have a good future. I think it is already happening. The conflict in Ukraine, Russia's aggressions at Ukraine has provided a better flexibility of the Ministry for National Defense. Recently, we didn't have any requirements that that would be proper requirements. Ministry was proposing some requirements that were taken from nowhere, and the industry could not deliver. So our company was developing a system for 13 years, and then the armed forces informed us that they didn't need it because it was too difficult to use. And nowadays we can see from the war in Ukraine that the market and the needs of the armies are changing very quickly. The Polish Ministry for National Defense has already seen it, and it becomes more flexible with its partners. So nowadays it's not about that we cannot discuss basic requirements. We have this discussion, and it's a good impulse, because even if the Ministry for National Defense has some expectations at the very first stage, the industry should inform how much time it needs to supply it and at which price. It's not possible to develop the things very quickly, but we can imagine a situation where we will be using such equipment as gap fillers. We will buy in small quantities to support our needs. But of course, in parallel, we should develop our technologies and solutions to build advantages of our industry. And Professor has mentioned it. Where should we develop such spaces? Since we do not have such technologies, even if we build an equipment based on some components, it will not be exportable, because the third countries do not export their technologies to other partners. They do not agree to such transfers. So despite of the fact that we have such an equipment developed in our country, we cannot do anything with it. We have to make sure that our equipment is ours. WB Group uses its own solution in 70 to 80%, and we want to make sure that these are purely Polish products. So we are providing value added for the country and for the sectors. It is repaid in the form of taxes. Let's get back to this cooperation with the Ministry of National Defense and Industry. Now it has improved, but there is one more problem. The needs are huge and we have a shortage of specialists. We are still missing people who are responsible for such tasks. So there are shortages both at the Ministry for National Defense and both for the industry. We work in different conditions. We can stimulate the market by supporting secondary schools and universities to make sure that we obtain our personnel engineers. But when we look at the Ministry for National Defense, if we talk about people who should stimulate this development, we are not having enough of subspecialists. Well, a question to you. Actually, we've heard an approach concerning human resources. It's not a secret that all the institutions, all the military economy are having problems with the quantity and quality of human resources. Even the agency for weapons has problems with employees to oversee contracts submitted by the army and entered into with the army. We will not have more human resources. Our demographic situation is very poor. So what to do to make sure that the armed industry and industry as such should be successful? You have mentioned the 20th economy, but we build it beyond innovation. We use cheap energy and cheap human resources. So nowadays, this is the era of innovation. So in this context, in the demand for arms, what to do to maintain the dynamics and to increase it? Luckily, tanks are not sold in supermarkets. Hence, well, the problem of demography is not that difficult. Together with the gentleman, we had this defense roundtable at the exchange office, and I had a good discussion with the head of the agency for arms, and he told me that the situation is not easy. But when we were talking specialists, when we were talking about the capacity of the agency, well, he said that the situation was not that bad. Very soon you will be able to read this report via Liberté website. So we were looking at the increase in the number of employees, for example, for this agency. So when we talk at the expenditure of the agency, have increased from 16 to 50 billion zlotys at the outbreak of the war in Ukraine. Now, the number of employees. So, from 390 people, actually now the agency employs 500 members of staff. So, the number of contracts is increasing and the number of employees is also increasing, but this is not proportional. So we have emphasized it in our report. We are also writing about the defense hub. President Stypułkowski has mentioned it. When we are looking at the side of demand, there is no problem with funding. But when we talk about the instrument of support to make sure that the industry should cooperate with the agency for armaments, they should venture capital funds. It should all be accumulated in the PFR group, in the so-called defense hub. There are also AB hubs that manage such processes. So these are the challenges we should face now. too much to provide good selection of projects. We are talking about cross-cutting themes project, but as President Zając said, it's not that we can afford manufacturing F-35 aircraft. The Czech can develop the training center for F-35 aircraft pilots, but to construct such multitask aircrafts is beyond our capabilities. Of course, the battlefield is changing. Probably tomorrow we will be discussing the drones war, and defense, the land defense is still difficult. There is asymmetry. But when we look at the air combat, the drones, the cost is about 50,000, and to shoot them down, actually the Dutch can do it. So there is this rocket the Dutch army used. Actually, it cost 4 million. So we have to think of a solution. So there is another asymmetry. So somebody has 20 drones and the other party can have 500 drones, and all these drones have to be shot down, just like in Ukraine. During the forum, we met with APS company. So APS has the anti-drone system. So for over a decade, they are trying to modernize the drones, and they are not very successful. So the point is, well, I'm not an expert in the battlefield. I only know economy. It is important. It's not important, just the money is not only important. The industry should know what they are doing. Some 2,000 engineers work for a WB group. Economists should also have something to do, to say. It's the so-called public policy. So what do the French do that they are so successful? They have already agreed that they would observe China. So when Chinese manufacture e-vehicle, they produce a chain of value starting with the rare metals, then they use subsidies, so on and so forth. And it's not that Chinese employees earn little money. The cost of the car is 30% lower. Why? Because they can manage, they can supervise the chain of values. They also install GPSs to control their citizens. I don't want to say that this model is worth following, but what do the French do? Well, they emphasize the role of the chain of values. They had this program, Global Value Chain. So OECD wrote a note to all the ministries, and they decided to search for some cross-cutting technologies, key technologies that Poland could contribute to. So we were asked by the ministry whether we know this list. So there was another question: how many sectors are included? 32. So for example, we had this question: why have you included the wood industry? And we said we cannot exclude this market because we need timber. So we have to have this global perspective. One more thing: why politics is important. Politicians follow just one indicator. Just like Sweden, the national value added really has impact on our profits, on our salaries. Some countries have been doing it for many years. In large conglomerate, Airbus, or other conglomerates, or Vattenfall in Sweden, they calculate the total contribution to society. So it's the national chain, national value added can be computed, and taxes. If we want to manufacture something in Poland, it's not just about an order for a company. such as the Polish armament company, but we should consider what kind of footprint we will receive. Now I would like to tell you about PGZ. President Wyszkiewicz gave an interview yesterday. I'm delighted with this interview. I would like to cite him. First of all, they are doing what we have proposed in our report that will be published by Liberté, so a domain-based approach. So no competition within PGZ group. So we have to make sure that we do not duplicate efforts and funds. Secondly, he said that he would cooperate with the private business to make sure that the chains of values will be stimulating. So crowding in additionality, value added, rather than crowding out. So this is what he said, and this is very positive in my opinion. I would like to ask you, we have 5 minutes more. It's a question to the professor. We have huge expenditure on armaments, so we are looking at the amount of 200 billion zlotys per annum. Very often we hear complaints that the Polish defense industry cannot provide adequate quantities of the equipment, because before we just wanted to have this industry earning profits was not important. So already we are witnessing some problems with the financing and with the maintaining the dynamics of expenditure on weapons. So what to do once these factories start operating in 2028-29, when they have manufacturing capacity, and then we will discover that the Ministry of National Defense will have no more funding, so maybe export is a solution. So I would like to ask all the presenters to tell us how to stimulate export to make sure that this is the driving engine for having these companies in Poland. First of all, you do not reinvent the circle. You have to observe Turkey, Korea, Israel. They have good mechanisms. Let's do the policy based on economic know-how. If there is Garcia Salvador and others report that states that if there is a high share of personnel cost, if these costs are growing, and this is the situation in Poland, according to Deloitte, after a decade, this cost is 790 billion zlotys. So it's a huge increase, much more than expenditure for the infrastructure, for the weapons. So this is a difficult situation. All the time we have problems with import and export, and the fiscal space is decreasing. So in these situations, if we have expenditure on defense, in general, we are underwater. We are in adverse situation. When we look at the fiscal multipliers, to improve them, we not only have to consider demand, but we have to look at the industrial policy that is concentrated on the side of supply. Then these multipliers will be increased, and that will stimulate economic growth. So we will have less problems with debts, and we will have more space for arms-related expenditure. So we have to work on this. This is important. So the Minister for Finance and Economy is responsible for budget, for the demand. He's responsible for economy, so I'm sure he's got an idea how to resolve this difficult situation. President Zając, I think that when we're talking about export, we should learn and observe other countries throughout the world. How does Turkey, Korea, and United States operate? And we should follow their patterns. We should now try to convince everyone that we know better what export should look like. Sometimes it seems to me that we are trying to teach the world how to trade in arms in the context of Poland, and actually it's completely opposite direction. So our company is a good example that shows how this kind of exporting activities should be conducted. But we should listen to the word, to other countries. Well, I'm really nervous because when I hear that Poland is successful because it had low cost of labor and energy, I cannot agree with this. Many countries in the world had low cost of labor and energy, and they were not as successful as Poland is. I know the professor very well. I really appreciate your economy-related policies. They are very important, but they shouldn't be overestimated. Entrepreneurs are the ones who contribute to success. They manufacture, they export, and they expand. Why? Because they receive some space to be able to develop for the purpose of the national demands. So we should allow businesses to develop. They want to earn money. They know how to cope on international markets, but we should allow them to grow in Poland, to obtain stability, to obtain this competitive advantage. They will know the ways how to operate. They will be using the example of other successful companies. Of course, we also have to have government contracts, but we should look at the results. It's not about complying with different criteria. We prefer module-based contracts, so we do not want to order everything at once. Entrepreneurs will manage. They will also manage with this demographic gap. They will invent robots. The cost of energy. Actually, they enforce the businesses to save energy. The energy consumption in Poland is falling within the past 5 years. And this is the end of our time, ladies and gentlemen. This is the end of our discussion. The time has flown. I would like to thank the panelists for their know-how. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for taking part in this panel. My name is Mariusz Marszałkowski. I am deputy editor of Defense 24 magazine, and we invite you to taking part in other panels held during the Freedom Games.
No ja, wiesz, to się wszystko, bardzo dziękuję panie rektorze. To się nam wszystko składa, nie? Tylko wszystko innowacyjna gospodarka lokalna, ale trzeba teraz tak, żeby podpracować. Ten papier się położy, teraz to macie mam nadzieję, że defense też będzie, zawsze będzie promować. I po prostu myśmy to napisali z studentem, tak? Z kapitułu, z osobami. Z tego, że jest pracę dyplomową, ja zegar z tego wręczył. Ja chętnie też w tym momencie tej pamięci, no bo dużo się dzieje, ale tutaj gości, którzy są poza, więc to jest żeby na pewno całość nie napisałem, tak? Jak to jest pracownica chciał, prawda, jak to widzimy. Oczywiście może to być złe, czy dobre, ale bądźmy nie komplikujmy, tak? Wiadomo, że są jakieś wzorce na zachodzie, to jest Turcji, Korei, to tego się nie da. Ja się 20 lat. Większość, jak się tak spotykamy na takim panale, to się zgadzamy. Nic pan z tego nie potrzebuje, tak? W Polsce resortowe rozmawiamy z pomiędzy resortami moje oceny, u nas takie jest jakaś mentalność, że nie robię żadnych tylko prawnicy. Mandaryny, ale to jak przychodzi, ale tu wchodzimy w kolejną rzecz. Za rok i 3 miesiące.
Jakie szukał, tu Polski szukał. Słuchajcie, kontrowersyjną taką tezę postawiłem, że zaraz pierwsze uchwalone, to ustawa o ograniczeniu wpływu związków zawodowych w przedsiębiorstwach sektora usługowego. Pierwsza raz. Kamień w wodę. Nikt nawet nie chce podjąć tematu. A teraz już
Piszemy w tym raporcie, na przykład wyceniamy takie przeciwstawne obrony ojczyzny. Bo zwrócić uwagę publiczną. Mówi do mnie tak.